Okay. Okay, so we're recording. Okay, so it's Alexander Lawrence from the Portable Infinite here. And today we're talking to Pearl Harbor, who was in Pearl Harbor and the explosion. She's also known as Pearly Gates. She was in the Tubes, Layla and the Snakes, bunch of bands, probably more. And I mean, it's kind of this band's kind of connected, or well, because you were in the Tubes, it was kind of connected when I first got into music in '75 when I was a kid, kind of getting kind of veering off from my parents' record collection because I lived in San Francisco. And I remember when I first started reading Circus Magazine and BAM Magazine in '75 or '76. Like, I remember being in, because I grew up in North Beach in San Francisco. I saw a flyer for the Tubes, and I go, "What the hell is this? This is pretty weird looking." It's like, I think it was a picture of Quaalude and stuff. And so you had
Oh,
you had moved to San Francisco real early, right? Like the '70s. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to San Francisco and how you got involved with the Tubes?
yeah, I left. I grew up in Germany, and I left my home and family in 1973 and moved to San Francisco. I was 17 years old, and I dropped out of high school. I'd never been to San Francisco, but my Army father got a subscription to Time magazine and Life magazine, and they were always doing articles and photographs about the hippie scene in San Francisco. And I said, "Oh, that looks like it's for me." And so I went out to San Francisco in '73, and I knew a few people from Germany that lived there. So I just hooked up with them and lived with them for a while. And got a job, and I started going to see as much music as I could as soon as I got there because I really did want to be in a band, and the Tubes were one of the first bands that I ever saw. When I saw them, I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do, because it was like a rock and roll circus. I know that you know that because you saw them, and there's everything on stage there. So the next thing I knew, that there was posters all over San Francisco, like in North Beach where you're from, and it was all Tubes Talent Contest, and this was 1976. And so I said, oh, here's my chance. So I found out as much as I could about the Tubes. I knew they liked Roxy music, and I know they liked Phil Manzanera and Diamond Head and all that stuff. So I got a Phil Manzanera track and learned to tap dance to it. And I was a tap dancing boxer, so I won their talent contest. And so the prize was that I got to dance with them for 3 weeks at Bimbo's. And I know you know Bimbo's. A lot of our listeners don't know Bimbo's, but it's a really cool nightclub in San Francisco. So I did 3 weeks of shows with them there, and we got along really well. They asked me if I wanted to do more shows with them, and I did. And then Jane Dornacher, who wrote "Don't Touch Me" there for the Tubes, and she was also performed with them. She wasn't a real member of the Tubes, but she performed with them all the time. She had an all-girl band called Leaving the Snakes, and she asked me if I wanted to join her band, and I did. So I got to dance with the Tubes and then be in Leaving the Snakes. And so starting 1977, I was in the Tubes and Leaving the Snakes, and so I was really happy.
What what did you think of San Francisco? I mean, the hippie, the Summer of Love was kind of like, that was like 10 years down the road.
Oh, I know, I missed that.
And it probably kind of got kind of dark, kind of drugs and other things kind of infiltrated the scene.
Yeah,
And then by '73, by the time you got there, San Francisco, I always see it as kind of like, there was always kind of a sense of cabaret and performance. And
yeah,
if you lived in North Beach back then, I mean, a lot of people, yeah, I mean, there was like all those places like the Golden Eagle and the Hotel Europa where you could stay for $5 a night or something.
yeah,
And there was a lot of people that went to, like, a couple of the Tubes went to San Francisco Art Institute,
yeah,
and there was like, I mean, it's had a history. San Francisco's had a history of the kind of theatrical bands like the Residents and Carolina
yeah,
Rainbow and the Tubes, and it was like they were always like, it was always about performance. It was kind of like the local scene, like they always like I mean, it's got this performance art history, I mean, there was the diggers and people around the
Yeah.
and stuff. What was your sense of like how San Francisco kind of differed from maybe other places back
Well,
then?
I didn't really have a lot to go on regarding the United States because I only lived in Germany. When I was a real little kid, like 6 years old, I lived in Arizona, but I don't remember it that well. Or so I didn't really know a lot about the United States, but I just thought that San Francisco was everything I hoped it would be because it was obviously really what how do I describe it? It, anything goes, the drag queen scene really got me because I thought that was really interesting and really fun. And I get along really well with the gays, so I that was real easy and fun for me to get involved with the drag queen scene. And I also met a lot of really great drag queens in the tubes because they had some performers. And yeah, I I just thought San Francisco was great because anything goes. It was sex and drugs and rock and roll, and that's what I was looking for. So that's what San Francisco. And San Francisco is really beautiful. It's really small. It's easy to figure out who you are and who you want to hang out with in a small city. Like New York would have been a lot more difficult, if you know what I mean.
The
So
the tubes lived over there in the Sunset District. Did you live out there, or did you where were
I
you
lived,
located in those years?
I lived on Polk Street in the 70s.
Oh,
So
okay, yeah, okay.
Polk Street was like,
That was like gay central. That was like the
it
original
was.
gay scene back then.
Absolutely, it was.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, because I lived in North Beach, I was kind of sheltered. I don't remember going to Haight Ashbury when I was a kid at all. And then
Oh,
I remember, I might have, I didn't, but I stayed kind of in North Beach and Washington Square Park in that area.
mhm.
I remember one of the first times I went to Polk Street and there was like two guys like kissing each other on the street. I go, oh wow, this is pretty weird. I was about five or something. I was like,
Well, yeah. I mean, the gays scene, it was not a mystery to me because I have a gay brother and a gay uncle. So when I was moved to San Francisco and saw everybody being openly and happily gay, I thought it was really great.
my dad was like the manager of a building on Sutter and Leavenworth back maybe like 77, 78, and like the whole most of the people that lived in the building were gay people.
Hmm.
So yeah, well, so you were in Leland and the Snakes. What was Jane Hornacker like? What was she like as a person?
Jane Dornacher,
Dornacker,
she
yeah.
she was a comedian, and she was the smartest, funniest, coolest woman I'd ever met in my life. She was 6 feet tall, and she wore like 6-inch platforms. So she was always nearly 7 feet tall, and I'm like 5'3". So we were a funny combo, me and her. But she wrote great songs. Her comedy routine was hilarious. She's the one who taught me everything about showbiz. Really, she taught me stuff like as soon as you get on stage, you got to get them laughing and make them smile, and then you got them. You got your audience once you make them laugh. And I've always been of that mind. I always remember that, and it's true. As soon as I get on stage, for the past 44 years or more, I always make sure to that everybody's smiling and laughing. She taught me that. She was really intelligent. She every every show before the shows she would read the newspaper, and she would come up with all her routines so that they were fresh and they were all current regarding the news. And so she always made really funny jokes about what was currently going on in the world. And everybody loved her. She was just hilarious, and she was really really cool, really smart woman. I
So
was lucky to be with her.
yeah, so the people that were in Layla and the Snakes, were they strippers? Did they work at like places like Mitchell Brothers or the Century Theater or anything like that?
Yeah, there was when I first joined the Tubes. I mean, yeah, the Tubes and Leland and the Snakes. Leland and the Snakes were an all-girl band at the time, and the Tubes dancers, Mary and Helene, and not Cindy, but some of the gals, they were all strippers on Broadway. So,
Okay. Oh, so some of the like the Carol Doda scene over there.
yeah, yeah, it's Mary and Helene worked at Carol Doda's place. Yeah, so I got to meet Carol Doda. She was a real trip.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's this Carol Doda documentary that just came out like this week or something. I saw a bunch of so yeah, because I remember when I was a kid, I used to see like postcards of Carol Doda and you're like
uh,
her name on the thing there,
uh,
Yeah, that was kind of it was real. I was real impressionable, you can tell.
well, yeah, I mean, when I first moved to San Francisco and saw all that, it impressed me too.
What about Reese Styles? She was in the Tubes and maybe Layla and the Snakes. What was she? I guess she lived in San Francisco for a long time. And died a few
Yeah,
years
it was
ago.
Ree was the only female member of the Tubes, and she was also incredible, incredibly beautiful, and very talented. And she and Prairie were a couple. Prairie, the Prince, the drummer, and the two of them were very, very good to me, and they helped me a lot. And Ree did a lot of Leela and the Snake shows. She did all the Tube shows, of course, because she was the main character, the main female character in the Tube shows. So Ree was really great, really, really great.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Tubes were kind of like a proto-punk band. I mean, they kind of were before punk. I mean, sort of similar. I mean, they had a couple fast songs. But so I mean, to me, like punk, when looking back, it was kind of over like 79, 80, in a way, because and then
Mm-hmm.
it just became like everybody became like post punk was more like a time of mashups, like people would combine stuff. Like I mean the Specials were kind of a new ska band, like kind of with and kind of punk, and they were kind of a mix between ska and punk
Right.
and other bands, what you were doing was kind of like a rockabilly punk mashup kind of in 79, 80 with this band. I have the record right here.
Well, Pearl Harbor and the Explosions wasn't really a mashup of rockabilly and punk. It was
Oh
more
yeah,
like
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
"Don't Follow Me, I'm Lost Too" is, but that record is more like that's a new wave record. That
yeah,
was
yeah. But I mean, you were playing. You were playing like at Mabuhay Gardens and
yeah.
with like the Nuns and Crime and
Hmm.
at the same time as Dead Kennedys. I mean, you were kind of yeah. I mean, yeah. If you listen to this record, you listen to Driving. It sounds almost like a Martha and the Motels type of song or something.
I don't know about that because I'm not familiar with their music, but yeah, that's just new wave. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought I always joke about if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have started a band with those three because we're not really musically compatible. They
Oh
like
right.
I like rockabilly and rock and roll and old '50s music and '60s music and garage and punk, and they were more interested in jazz and fusion and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I had a hard time.
Yeah, there were some guys back then they thought like, oh, they wanted to show off their musicianship or something, and those
Mhm.
guys existed back then. So, yeah, there was this place down in South of Market, Fifth and Folsom called the Automat. I guess the Clash recorded their part of their second album there. So you record what was the Automat like? It was there for about 8 years, and did you record all your albums there or singles?
No, I only recorded one. Uh, Pearl Harbor Explosions. We recorded that at Wally Hyder's. And so the Automat I had been to many times, and when Joe and Mick were working on Give 'Em Enough Rope with Sandy Pearlman at the Automat. I went and visited them because of my boyfriend at the time, Cosmo Vinyl, was their personal manager. So that's how I originally hooked up with the Clash was at the Automat with Joe and Nick.
What?
But yeah, but
How did you?
I didn't record
you did one single with 415 Records.
Yeah,
What were they like?
415.
Yeah.
Well, we were the first people that did a single with them, so it wasn't like they were established or anything. They had it was a bunch of nice guys that I knew that worked at a record store that I think is in the Castro, because my mind is failing me.
Oh,
Aquarius Records. They all worked at
oh,
Aquarius
oh,
Records.
right. Yeah, I think they had an office in the Mission, and yeah, Aquarius Records was kind of like, yeah, that wasn't also kind of like on the border of the Mission, Castro, like you say,
Uh-huh.
Aquarius Records. Yeah, that was. Oh yeah, I didn't know that they were okay. Yeah, and yeah, and kind of like what I said before. Okay, so this record, the second record, was more
Yeah.
like a proto mashup of like rockabilly and kind
Yeah.
of punk together.
Uh-huh.
And I have a promotional copy here.
Way to go. Way to go.
But I also have like what we're talking about today is the new kind of
Yeah.
with with extra tracks and stuff. I really like Voodoo Voodoo. What's going on in that song?
That's an old Laverne Baker song cover tune that I used to love to perform live on stage. And Wilco Johnson recorded with me that the whole album, "Don't Follow Me, I'm Lost Too." So during that time, we became friends, and we talked about music all the time and our love of 50s and 60s records, blah blah blah. And Wilco really liked the song "Voodoo Voodoo," so he said, "Let's do a single, and I'll produce it." So he had a little recording studio that was like, a basement room, and he just had all the room mic and a vocal mic, and no overdubs. Go in there, and just one or two takes, and that was it. No overdubs, vocals all live with the music, 4-track reel to reel tape deck, and it took like 2 hours to do two songs. And it was really a great experience because Wilco is such a character, and he only likes things old school. He doesn't like overdubs. He doesn't like a song if it's over 3 minutes. He doesn't like, you know, any frills, no frills.
So a lot of these people that you mentioned, like Cosmo Vinyl and the guys from the Clash and Ian Dury and Dr. Feelgood. I mean, did you meet them when they came over here to America, or did you go over to England real early?
I met Cosmo in 1977 at a rehearsal studio in San Francisco, SIR, which you probably know
Yeah.
SIR. And Ian Jury was in the room next to us. I didn't know that. And it was 1977, his one and only American tour. And so I was in the lobby, and Cosmo was also in the lobby, and he came up to me and said, "You're the second most beautiful girl I've seen today." And I was like, "Oh, brother." And then he said, "You want to see the best rock and roll bands in the world?" And I was like, "Yeah, who's that?" And he said, "Ever heard of Ian Jury and the Blockheads?" Yes. And the only reason I'd heard of Ian Jury and the Blockheads was because our band had been a support act for Elvis Costello. And Elvis Costello told me, his band rather, they all were talking about Stiff Records and Nick Lowe and Reckless Eric and Ian Jury. So I went and bought all the Stiff Records. And so when Ian Jury was in the room next to me, I just couldn't believe it. So I went and watched them rehearse, and it was really, really, absolutely fantastic. And so I became friends with Cosmo, and he said, "I work with Ian Jury and the Clash, and I like you, and I like your music, and you should leave your band of jazz fusion and come to London and play rock and roll." And I said, "Sounds good to me." And that's what I did.
So you did that song Litzy. You never there's a live version on like a reissue,
Uh-huh.
but I mean that song's kind of famous because it was when they did the Stiff tour with Elvis Costello and Ian Dury. I think they played it as the encore where they all jumped on stage and did Lizzie
Uh-huh.
and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Kind of known for that. So yeah, I didn't know you recorded that. or we used to play it as kind of did you do it as an encore or just it was
Yeah,
part of the set?
we always did it as an encore, and we never recorded it, but we played it live all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, getting back to Cosmo Bino, I mean, he was like showing this picture of the first album.
Mhm.
You kind of looked a little bit like Tura Santana, and
Oh, I love tourists at that. Thank you.
maybe kind of uh, like an Amy Winehouse, kind of like 10 years before her, or I guess it was 20 years now. I mean, you kind of look in some of the pictures, you look a little bit like Amy Winehouse.
Well, rather, she looks a little like
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've heard that many times.
yeah.
That's fine because I love Amy Winehouse. She's a great artist, great singer, great songwriter.
Yeah.
It's a shame she was so messed up.
Yeah, and she was also another person that kind of like mixed genres
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
stuff. So let's see, where are we at here? Okay, so oh, did did you move to Ladbroke Grove for a while, or when was that?
When I moved to London in, I think it was May of 1980,
Okay.
and then the first place I lived was Bow, which was where Cosmo lived, which was the east end of London. So it was a very poor section of London, and that was a really, really interesting, fun place to live. And then after I made the album, and I started going out with Paul, then I moved in with him, and he lived in Ladbroke Grove. So I moved in with Paul in like 1981.
Yeah, yeah. I was in London a few years ago. I stayed in Hammersmith, is about 2 miles away, close to the Red Cow. I don't know if you ever played there.
No, but now London is way different because we're talking about 1980, and the East End of London was really
Yeah,
poor, and now the East End of London is,
yeah,
well,
yeah. The first time I went to London, I stayed in Hackney, which was like that was in the '90s and stuff. And yeah, it was starting to change. Like it was
uh-huh,
becoming like hipster London
right.
back then. So okay, so we got this new record. We're kind of celebrating this new record with the bonus tracks. Everyone, make sure you buy a couple copies. Buy one for your mom and all your family members. And yeah, we talked about that. So oh, you had like a nudie suit. Like, do you still have that, or where did you
Yeah,
get that?
I still have a nudie suit. Did you ever go to the flea market, the Sausalito Flea Market, which was
No,
really fun, the Marin City Flea
no,
Market?
but I went to the Fairfax one over here on in LA here.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. You got that. At any rate, I got the nudie suit. Oh gosh, it was in the early '90s at the flea market, and the lady who owned it said that it belonged to the drummer from the Doobie Brothers. And when I lived in Marin County in the early '70s, because I lived in Marin and San Francisco, the guy, I forget his name, was his name Tommy Johnson or something? The drummer from the Doobie Brothers, but he was a neighbor of mine, and he was a really small guy because I'm really small myself. So I couldn't believe that that little nudie suit fit a guy, but it fit. And yes, I still have it, and I still wear it.
Yeah, that's okay. So oh yeah, I was you toured, you played a lot of shows and toured with Talking Heads, B-52s, Boomtown Rats. Were those, did you tour with those second two bands, or was that just like a couple shows there?
That was just a couple shows. We toured extensively with the Talking Heads, and
How
that was for about a 3 month tour all across the United States and Canada. That was really, really fun for me because not only did I love their band, but Tina and I were the only women, so we shared a dressing room every night, and we really enjoyed ourselves. I'll tell you that.
so yeah, also this the second album didn't really get like much attention. The label sort of like sometimes sometimes like labels like sign people, and then by the time the record comes out, all those people are like fired, and then they just kind of forget about records and stuff. Or
Well, that wasn't the case with me. The case with me was that Warner Brothers really liked. Oops, sorry. they really liked Pearl Harbor and the Explosions, and they signed us, and they sunk a lot of money into us, and they spent a lot of time promoting the record and a lot of money. And then, as soon as the tour was over, I said, I'm moving to London, and I'm sorry, I'm leaving the Explosions. They were very, very angry. And so when I moved to London, they were very angry, and they said, all right, well, we'll see, we'll pay for a solo record, and go ahead and give us what you got. So then I gave them Don't Follow Me on Lost 2, and they hated it. They said, there's no hits. We don't, what's this rockabilly music? None of this is contemporary. None of this is radio worthy. We're not happy with it at all. And why didn't you list any of the musicians? And, I was trying to be all punk rock about not listing the musicians. I said, I don't want to list the musicians because the British press will just eat me up like they do with most Americans back then. They weren't very kind to me, and I could just imagine that they would say the only reason anybody's listening to this album is because the Clash and the Blockheads are on it. So I said, let's just leave the musicians out of it, and let's just see what the record does on its own. Well, since the record company didn't like it, they didn't promote it, and they hardly printed any copies, and they didn't send any copies to the United States. So it's really, I think they sent, like a couple hundred copies to the United States, so it's,
Yeah, here's one here.
nobody ever heard it. It was never available. That's why you have a promo.
Yeah,
Something funny, Alex, is I have a promo copy too. I don't, the American thing, it's really
yeah,
hard to find
yeah.
an
I
American.
never saw this. I mean, I saw this record. I mean, I used to see you like in BAM magazine, and
Yeah. But that, like I said, they did an excellent job promoting that record, and then they did zero with Don't Follow Me on Lost 2.
yeah, I mean,
That's why I'm really happy that
it's sad because yeah, a lot of people would have been like down with this one if they ever saw it. I mean, it didn't. It seemed like it come out. Record stores weren't really behind it. I mean, so they kind of put a because the experience of that second record, they kind of put a halt. Like Pearls Galore, it was almost like 3 or 4 years later. I mean, at that same time, I mean, the Clash were doing like 5, 6 records, and they did a couple films, and like because they did that Stains movie and the Rude Boy movie. They were there, and they were doing records like this and stuff, and I think there was more probably stuff that they did, that we don't even know about. The thing about the Clash, they were really active doing, maybe too active at that time.
Well, I don't think so. I think they just never wanted to be at home doing nothing. They were always doing something, especially Joe and Paul. That's why they sort of had a problem with Mick. Was that Mick was more like your average Joe in the way that after you work hard, you want to take a rest and relax. And Joe and Paul were not like that. They just wanted to go, go, go. And everybody was really young. Everybody's in their 20s, and they have a lot of energy and a lot of ideas, and they just want to do stuff. They don't want to sit around. So that's why the Clash, especially Joe, got involved in so many different projects.
I think Mick was smoking a lot of weed back then too.
Back then, try now. Back
I haven't
then,
seen him in a while. But yeah, I mean, there was all these guys, that these kind of punk refugees that kind of existed in San Francisco, like Klaus Fluoride and East Bay Ray. So you ended up later playing with East Bay Ray. That's right.
yeah.
What was that about?
Oh, when I left London after Paul and I split up, I moved back to San Francisco. I think it was in '88, and I went and saw as many bands as I could because I wanted to put a band together right away, and I didn't know who was doing what. So one of the bands that I loved very much, I don't know if you ever saw them, was Butt Naked and the Bare Bottom Boys.
Yeah. I saw
you?
because I moved back after college. I moved back to San Francisco, so I saw a lot of bands in the later '80s and '90s. And
The Bug.
I used to live right by the Paradise Lounge, so
Yeah,
it's a lot of
that's where they played all the time. That's where
yeah.
we played all the time too. Yeah, so I loved them because I had a sense of humor. I loved the way they looked and everything. So I asked Buck if he wanted to put a band together, and he said yes. And then I said, well, if you were going to start a rock band, name all your favorite musicians you'd like to have in the band. And he said, well, on guitar, I'd like to have East Bay Ray. So I called him up. I didn't know him. And I said, hey, I'm me, and do you want to play with me? And he said, yeah. So every musician that Buck picked out, they all said yeah. So I really had fun, and I really lucked out that everyone wanted to play with me.
Yeah, what about like after the Clash kind of broke up in '85? I mean, I think when Paul Simon was doing Havana 3 a.m., I think he moved to LA. I think he used to live over on La Brea by the where there was the King and the Pick Me Up Cafe. I think he used to live in that neighborhood over there. Do you know anything about that, or was that like
Yeah, I wasn't living there with him. Paul and Nigel, my old guitar player, and we started a band. This was in the late '80s, and then the Clash manager, Bernie Rhodes, he came over and said, you know, what are you doing playing music with Pearl? Who do you think you are, Paul and Linda McCartney? And I was kind of like, oh, brother. And he said to Paul and Nigel, why don't you guys go to the United States and buy motorcycles and drive around and write music and, you know, start something new? And so that's what they did. So they both left me and moved to Los Angeles.
yeah, they were living on La Brea like for a couple years because I saw him a couple times over there, and that there was that club, the King or whatever. Did you ever go there?
Yeah, I went there. I played there. I don't. I wasn't that familiar with LA scene and all that until I moved there, and I moved there in '96.
Oh,
So
okay,
by then, you know, Havana at 3 a.m. and all that were long gone.
right. So, well, yeah, here's the record again. I mean, it has like the album, and then it's got like six bonus tracks, B-sides, and then you have another. Yeah, the first album kind of came out in a like a reissue, and that has like some live tracks too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, let me ask you, did you get the rights back to all your early music through Warner
Yes.
Brothers?
I did, uh-huh. So I've made 5 albums, and 3 of them have been re-released, and I got back all the rights to all my music. And the two that didn't, that are not available to anybody, even to me, are Epic Sony. They did Pearls Galore, and that was for Japan only. And then Island Records signed me in England in 1983, I think, and it was basically uh, they had me re-record Pearls Galore, the one that I had made for Japan, and they took off a few songs and had me add some other ones. So there's 2 of my albums called Pearls Galore, but they both have different music on them, and they are for different countries. And those are not available anywhere, and I can't get the music rights back, but I'm going to keep trying.
If people want to get your music, where should they go to? Do you have a website or?
Yeah, it is Liberation Hall,
Oh, right.
Liberation Hall Records, or Liberation Hall for You, the number 4 and then the letter U. That's their Instagram. My Instagram is Pearl Harbor Music, and I always list all the ways that you can hear my music or buy it. So if anybody's interested, they could, you know, hook
Okay.
up to that.
Okay. Well, I'll put links to your Instagram and Liberation Hall Records in the description, and people can buy many copies and follow, check up what you're doing. Or are you going to play some shows coming up, or what do you think?
Well, I have a country band that I had just put together, but to tell you the truth, it's not a nice story. But I have lung cancer now, so I can't sing, and I'm very sick. So
Okay.
I'm going through all the chemo treatments now and having a hard time, but I am still here, and I hope to get rid of this cancer. And I don't know, you know, what's going to happen, but the doctor said it would be a long time before I can sing again. So it's a shame, but I'm going to try, Alex, you know, as soon as I can start, you know, as soon as I get more energy, I'll try and start singing again. But I'm singing country and western
Okay, well, everyone go buy the record right now and
now.
check out her website. Start following her on Instagram. Thanks for talking to me, Pearl Harbor. And let me see. Okay.